Writing clean code and code standards, PSR1, PSR2. Writing clean code is essential for creating readable, maintainable, and scalable applications. PHP Fig introduced PHP Standard Recommendations, PF, to promote consistency and best practices in PHP codebases. The provided code follows PSR1 and PSR2 standards, which dictate that namespace declarations should be on top, followed by class declarations. Class names are studly caps, methods are camel case. Visibility must be declared on all methods, and opening braces for classes and methods must go on their own line. Control structures' opening braces go on the same line, and they have one space before the opening parentheses. PSR2 also extends PSR1 by adding more specific rules, such as one space after commas in argument lists and no space before commas. Code commenting and documentation. Code commenting and documentation are crucial practices for maintaining and understanding code. Proper comments can describe the purpose and behavior of code, making it readable and maintainable for yourself and others. Documentation provides deeper insight, including usage, parameters, and return values of functions. The provided code snippet includes a PHP function add with a docblock comment describing its purpose, parameters, and return type. Single-line comments are also used to describe the specific application of the add function. This commenting provides clarity on the function's usage and expected behavior, ensuring code readability and easier maintenance. Error and exception best practices. Error and exception handling is a critical aspect of PHP development. Proper handling ensures robust, maintainable code and improves readability. Use try-catch blocks for exceptions and set an error handler for errors. Distinguish between recoverable errors and exceptions, choosing the right type to handle each case. Log errors consistently and provide clear messages for debugging. Avoid suppressing errors with @ and let your application fail gracefully. Unit testing with PHPUnit. PHPUnit is a widely used testing framework for PHP, which is designed to write and run tests for PHP code. Unit testing involves testing individual components of the code to ensure they function correctly in isolation. By writing tests, developers can check the logic of their functions, methods, and classes, and verify that they work as expected over time, even after codebase changes. In the given code, Calculator Test is a test case class that extends the test case class provided by PHPUnit. Inside Calculator Test, there is a test add method which represents a unit test for a hypothetical add method of a calculator class. The assert equals method is an assertion provided by PHPUnit to check if the two arguments are equal. If add22 returns 4, the test passes. Otherwise, it fails, indicating that there is a bug in the add method. Functional testing. Functional testing in PHP involves testing the software system against the functional requirements specifications. The purpose is to ensure that the application is behaving correctly as per the defined criteria by testing each function with the specific conditions and comparing the output with the expected outcome. The given code is an example of a PHP unit test using PHPUnit, which is a testing framework in PHP. The test class stackTest extends the test case class provided by PHPUnit. Within this class, there is a test method testPush and pop that tests a couple of the array functions, push and pop. This functional test checks whether, after pushing an item to an array, the item exists, and after popping the last item, the array is empty, complying with the expected functionality of these methods. Performance optimization. Performance optimization in PHP involves techniques that enhance the speed and efficiency of your application. These can include code refactoring, using efficient algorithms, and minimizing resource usage. No specific code examples needed, as this is a conceptual overview. Key strategies include optimizing database queries, using caching, minimizing network calls, and avoiding unnecessary computations. Profiling PHP applications. Profiling is a crucial part of optimizing and understanding the performance of a PHP application. It allows developers to measure the resources, like time and memory, that their code consumes during execution, and identify bottlenecks or inefficient pieces of code. Tools like Xdebug and Blackfire can be used for this purpose. The code above is a trivial example where the sum function is deliberately made slow by adding a uSleep call, which makes the script wait for 100 milliseconds. In a real-world scenario, the function may contain actual code you want to analyze. To profile this script, ensure that you have Xdebug installed and enabled, and then run your application. Xdebug will collect profiling information that can be visualized using tools like WebGrind or QCacheGrind to identify which parts of your application are using the most resources. Debugging techniques. Debugging is the process of identifying and fixing issues within a program. In PHP, effective bugging involves a combination of tools and strategies to locate the source of a problem, understand it, and correct it. The error reporting EALL function is used to set the error reporting level to the highest possible. InySet, display errors 1, is used to ensure that errors are printed to the screen as part of the output, which is helpful during development, but should be turned off in a production environment. The code snippet demonstrates error output when trying to use an undefined constant, allowing you to see where and what the error is in your script. Using version control Git with PHP. Version control is an essential tool for developers, including those working with PHP. Git is a widely used version control system that allows you to track changes, roll back to previous versions, and collaborate effectively with others. The command git init initializes a new Git repository in your current working directory. This is typically the first command you run in a new PHP project to start version control. Introduction to PHP frameworks. PHP frameworks provide a starting structure for building web applications. They are designed to streamline the development process by offering a basic architecture, which includes pre-packaged functions and classes for common tasks. A PHP framework can include features like database abstraction, input sanitization, session management, and more. It promotes best practices such as DRI, don't repeat yourself, and MVC, model view controller, pattern, making code more organized and maintainable. No specific PHP code is needed here. The concept is more theoretical. Symfony. Symfony is a set of reusable PHP components and a web application framework. It's designed for developers who need a simple and elegant toolkit to create full-featured web applications. We haven't discussed any code yet, just introduced the topic. Symfony helps speed up the creation and maintenance of your PHP web applications, following the Model View Controller (MVC) pattern. Laravel. Laravel is a modern PHP framework designed for web application development that follows the MVC Model View Controller architectural pattern. It provides a structured and standardized way to build robust and maintainable web applications. Laravel abstracts complex functionalities with simple, expressive syntax. It includes tools for routing, HTML templating, ORM, Eloquent, and features such as database migrations, seeding, RESTful controllers, middleware, and more. It's built to help developers write clean, maintainable code. CodeIgniter. CodeIgniter is a powerful PHP framework with a very small footprint. It's designed for developers who need a simple and elegant toolkit to create full-featured web applications. CodeIgniter prioritizes simplicity, performance, and flexibility. This introduction outlines what CodeIgniter is and highlights its key design goals. The explanation isn't accompanied by code, since it focuses on introducing the concept rather than providing a practical example. Zend Framework. Zend Framework is an open-source framework for developing web applications and services using PHP. It follows the Model View Controller (MVC) pattern and features a collection of professional PHP packages that can be used separately or together. Here we discuss a brief introduction to Zend Framework without specific code. It encapsulates components for tasks like authentication, forms, and database connections. Its use-at-will architecture and component library allows developers to implement only the components they need. Introduction to CMS. A content management system, CMS, is a software that facilitates creating, editing, organizing, and publishing content. PHP is a popular server-side language used to develop CMSs. In this PHP code, we're simulating a basic interaction with a CMS. A method getContent from a CMS object is called to fetch content for an about page. The retrieved content is then output to the browser using echo. WordPress development. WordPress themes define the visual appearance and layout of a WordPress website. They consist of a collection of files called template files, style sheets, and functions files. One of the main template files is index.php, which is the default template. The code above is a basic structure of a WordPress index.php file. It uses WordPress template tags to include the header and footer, and a loop to display posts. GetHeader includes the header.php file. The loop checks if there are any posts and then outputs them. And getFooter includes the footer.php file. Drupal Basics. Drupal is a powerful content management system, CMS, written in PHP. It allows users to easily build and manage content on websites. In this section, we will cover the basics of creating a simple custom module in Drupal. The code above is an example of a Drupal hook, specifically hook help. Hooks in Drupal are functions that allow modules to interact with the Drupal core. The hook help function is used to provide module-specific help text. The function myModuleHelp checks if the path corresponds to the help section for myModule. If it does, it returns translated text that will be displayed to the user seeking help for the module. The T function is used for translation purposes, making this text available for localization. Using PHP with Docker and virtualization. Docker offers a lightweight, isolated environment called a container. PHP applications can be containerized to ensure consistent performance across multiple environments. You'll learn to define a PHP Docker environment using a Docker file and manage services with dockercompose.yml. The provided code snippet is a basic Docker file. It starts with a PHP 7.4 base image, copies the current directory into the /ussas/myapp directory inside the container, sets the working directory to /myapp, and defines the default command to run a PHP script index.php. This container can be built and executed to run a PHP application in an isolated environment. Microservices architecture in PHP. Microservices architecture is a design approach to build a single application as a suite of small, independent services, each running in its own process and communicating with lightweight mechanisms. In PHP, this can be achieved using various frameworks and libraries designed to work with HTTP communication and service-oriented architectures. In this PHP snippet, we're using the Guzzle HTTP client to send a GET request to a hypothetical microservice. The service is expected to return a JSON response, which we then decode into a PHP variable. The client class is an abstraction provided by Guzzle to facilitate sending HTTP requests and handling responses. This is a simplistic example of interacting with a microservice endpoint in PHP. PSR standards and interoperability, HTTP message, logger, etc. PSR standards, PHP standards recommendations, are a set of standardized specifications meant to ensure consistency and interoperability between PHP components, frameworks, and libraries. They are provided by the PHP FIG, PHP Framework Interoperability Group. Standards such as PSR7, HTTP message interfaces, and PSR3, logger interface, allow developers to create reusable code that can work seamlessly with other compliant components. The provided code snippet outlines the implementation of the PSR3 logger interface in a custom logging class. The myLogger class declares it implements the logger interface, which comes from the PSR3 standard, and, therefore, the class must define all the methods required by the logger interface. Any instance of myLogger can be used with other libraries or components that are built to work with a PSR3 logger, demonstrating interoperability enabled by adhering to the PSR standards. Event-driven programming in PHP. Event-driven programming is a programming paradigm centered around the processing of events. In PHP, this means writing code that responds to events such as user input, messages from other processes, or internal triggers. This style of programming is particularly useful for developing applications that require high levels of interactivity, such as web applications and services. In the provided PHP code, we're using Symfony's Event Dispatcher component. First, we create a new event dispatcher. Then, we add a listener that responds to the order.placed event. Within the listener's callback, we echo a message with the order ID. Later, when an order-placed event is dispatched with the order.placed identifier, our listener's callback is invoked, and the message is displayed. This demonstrates how event-driven programming in PHP can be achieved using a popular PHP framework component. Creating and consuming APIs. APIs, application programming interfaces, allow different software systems to communicate with each other. In PHP, you can create an API endpoint that outputs data in a structured format like JSON and consume APIs by sending HTTP requests and handling the responses. Here, we'll set up a simple API endpoint and demonstrate how to consume it using PHP's GraphQL functions. In the code snippet, the first part creates a simple API endpoint. It sets the content type to application JSON and outputs a JSON-encoded response array with a status and message. The second part demonstrates consuming an API. It initializes a QRL session to the specified API endpoint, sets options to return the response as a string, executes the QRL session, closes the QRL session, and finally decodes the JSON response into an associative array. Advanced REST and GraphQL APIs. REST, representational state transfer, is an architectural style for designing networked applications. Advanced REST APIs in PHP often involve using frameworks like Laravel or Symfony to create endpoints that are secure, cacheable, and adhere to the principles of REST. Features like authentication, rate limiting, resource nesting, and versioning are common in advanced RESTful services. The code provided is a simple example using Laravel's eloquent ORM and pagination for building a RESTful endpoint. In a Laravel application, it defines a product controller with an index method that fetches paginated results of products from the database and returns them as a JSON response. This is part of a REST API where clients could consume this endpoint to retrieve a list of products.